Powered by the Zapata Brand Studio. This is Straight Outta Jersey with Jersey Jay-Z.
Welcome to Straight Outta Jersey. I'm your host, Joe Zapata, and my next guest is a former WWE superstar who wrestled under Aldo Montoya, but he's best known as ECW heavyweight champion of the world, just incredible. I welcome to the show, PJ Polaco. How you doing, PJ?
I'm doing fantastic, sir. How are you?
Good, brother. How you been? I always like to ask all the legends and everything that wrestled. You took a lot of bumps over your years. How was your health overall?
My health's okay. I've been blessed, man. No complaints. I mean, other than, little aches and pains here or there. But throughout I did about 30 years, not so much these days, but 30 years as a pro. I've never had a surgery. I've been blessed. So I feel pretty good, man,
Wow. Did you grow up a wrestling fan?
I did. I started watching wrestling right around the time Hulk Hogan won the belt from the Iron Sheik. I was a kid. I remember watching, actually, this shows you how old I am. I watched the actual title match Saturday mornings on a black and white TV with antennas, like the rabbit ears, so that far, so wow. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So what made you that right there decide you were going to go into the business?
I went to high school, Holy Cross, which means it's a preparatory school for college. I had all intentions of going to college, and I took a year off, and I remember vividly working at a grocery store, convenience store, bagging groceries, doing the typical stuff you do as a teen. And back then, no internet. Wrestling was still a bit kayfabe in 92, I believe this was. And for the first time ever, I saw on my break, there's a magazine section, and I was looking at a Pro Wrestling Illustrated for the 15-20 minutes you got for break, and I saw this in the back. There was an article or an advertisement for Hart Brothers Pro Wrestling Camp. I'd never seen anything like that before. And there was a number and everything, and this whole ad. And I spoke to Bruce Hart, and the bug then started to become a reality. You know what I mean? Because I'd done backyard wrestling as a kid, just for fun, because I loved it so much, and I was actually pretty good even before, not pretty good, but I knew how to do this stuff before I went to wrestling camp. And I was like, this is something I've got to try. And the rest is history,
So who trained you when you started?
Keith and Bruce Hart ran the camp. They were the officials behind it, but Lance Storm was the one. I went up to Calgary. Lance Storm was actually the one in ring training, and he was there. Him and Jericho were there the year prior in 91 for me coming up in 92, the summer of 92. So most of the in ring work was Lance Storm. Yeah.
Wow. Now, so you were doing independent shows. Is that first before you got to WWE?
I literally came home from Calgary, and again, back then, man, I didn't know there were wrestling schools in New York because I'm from Connecticut. I didn't know a lot of stuff because again, I was just, as much as I thought I knew, I was really just a mark. So I got booked on some small indie stuff, maybe 10 shows, and I wasn't really getting anywhere, and then in more towards March of 93, I decided to get get some nerve, and I went backstage to a WWE house show, and I was like, you're always told to bring your gear, so I brought my gear. I was all happy, and Tony Gurria, who's to this day I still talk to Tony. He was the producer, as you call him today, but back then we called him agents. He was the agent. He's like, no, we don't need anybody, but you're welcome to stay back here and watch the show, which I did, and then as I'm leaving, I said, thank you, sir, so much. That was amazing, whatever. And he gives me his card, and he goes, we're starting a show in Manhattan called Monday Night Raw. And he goes, we need extras. He says, you're local. You could, come in. We'll give you $150. And so that's how I started. My first match was against Lex Luger on Monday Night Raw. And, you started to, and they called me back. And after about a year, I was called up to go work with Undertaker and Brian Lee in Stamford. That's when they
Mm.
were doing the double Undertaker
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
And they wanted to do rehearsals. So I did a week of rehearsals with Brian Lee and Undertaker, just us working in the ring so they can get his mannerisms down and stuff like that. But on Friday, they did a dress rehearsal with Vince McMahon and Pat Patterson came down to see how Brian Lee looked in the gear and the
Mhm.
whole thing. So we did a professional like kind of walkthrough, and then from there, I started talking to Pat and Vince. And like anything else, you get relationships and you build them. And all along, they were looking for a Portuguese kid to do Aldo Montoya, which was
Mm.
wild. So I happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Now, how did they come up with that outfit? Did they show you what it looked like? What it looked
I,
like?
I really wish I still had the drawings. At first, Aldo was supposed to be a soccer player
Oh wow.
because this was around the time of the World Cup. And I think it was '94, and the Cup was coming to America. So they were trying to do a soccer kind of gimmick to go along with the World Cup. But when that didn't go through, Aldo was really the way the drawings were amazing. It looked like a Power Ranger, like it looked like a badass Power Ranger with like Road Warrior style spikes and cool
Mm,
mask.
mm,
It's supposed to be like originally like a Kane looking mask. They just didn't have time or whatever the resources at that time, believe it or not, to get that done. So I had what I had, and I never wrestled under a mask before.
mm.
Never really was on TV being put over. So it was all
Yeah,
very new to me. But
yeah.
it
I was
worked out as best it
yeah.
could, you know.
I was talking to Steve Lombardi, and he told me I was talking to him yesterday, and he was telling me wrestling under a mask when he
Yeah.
did kimchi can be a little bit difficult. Was it for
Yes.
you?
Yes, sir. Because it just takes away your peripherals. Even though the mask was sort of open, you could breathe, better than you could with a regular mask. It's still very challenging, and especially when you haven't done it before. It takes some getting used to for sure.
Mhm. What is it like wrestling in front of a big crowd, like in Madison Square Garden? Is it
Yeah.
something really crazy, exciting when you did it for the first time?
It is, but it's not as hard as people might imagine. The worst thing is quite the opposite. It's when you're wrestling in front of like 40 or 50 people and there's no noise. At least
Mm,
when you go out there, it almost feels like you're a world away. And that sounds really weird, but it's so big. The ring is so big, the lights and everything. You don't really see the people. So to me, it was always like kind of like business as usual. I thought the more intimate settings were much scarier for me.
now you people don't know that you're actually a sort of a member of the clique, believe it or not, because
That's what
you
they
hung
say,
out.
yeah.
That's what they say, right? But I mean, those guys, you got a relationship with those guys, didn't you?
Oh,
Develop that?
sure. Yeah, yeah. I remember very, very vividly. I was so young, as I remember telling we talked about earlier, that
Mhm.
I couldn't rent a car. So I remember my first road trip being on the road. I got to somewhere in Ohio. I think it was Cincinnati, I believe. And I got there and I couldn't rent a car. So I had to drive with Tony Gurria
Mm,
and the agents. And Razor, Scott Hall, God rest his soul,
yeah.
came up to me and he's like, kid, you're gonna get a lot of heat traveling with the agents. He goes, from now on, come with me.
Mm,
And that's how that started. And then I just got kind of swept up, and I was Scott's friend, Scott's boy, and I always got along with Kevin and Sean and Hunter and those guys, but I just kind of became you know, that other guy.
yeah. Did you
you
get ribbed
know,
at all in the locker room? Did they rib you?
a little bit, little bit, little bit, yeah,
A
but
little
nothing.
bit.
Back then it was really. It was more hazing to
Mhm.
like it was more like when you're like a sorority or a fraternity, they just kind of want to see what you're made of. If you're gonna flip out, if you're gonna how you react to certain situations. It wasn't anything bad, or it was just for a couple of weeks, and
Yeah.
then time moves on, and that's it. But yeah, a little bit.
Okay. So I do want to ask you, Vince McMahon, he's been in the news recently with all the
Sure.
stuff going on. He had the documentary. You worked for him. How is he in the locker room with you? And did you see any inappropriate behavior?
I mean, Vince was very much protected always. Not and protected by meaning like he wasn't easy to get to. He was always in his office. You had to, you just couldn't walk in there. I mean, I certainly couldn't. So, you only would see Vince in passing
Mhm.
or in Gorilla. So I never had. I mean, Vince was always great to me. If I had a problem, I could go straight to Vince. I never saw anything inappropriate. But then again, I'm not there when the cameras are. I mean, certainly during television, I didn't see anything. But who knows what happened? What really goes on?
Mhm. So your character, Aldo, it started losing steam. I mean, you got a big push in the beginning, then started
Sure.
losing steam, everything. Did you want to leave and look elsewhere? Maybe
Oh yeah.
WCW?
Oh
Yeah. You
yeah.
saw anything else?
When Kevin and Scott had left to go to WCW, I actually had a meeting with Vince. I went up to Stamford, and again, this is he was always very good to me, and I went up there and I was like, "Look, Vince, because I had a year left on my contract, and I had been doing really well. I was working at the time with Chris Candido, God rest his soul too,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
we were having killer matches. I was really doing what I thought and what everybody, the agents had told me as well, having some of the best matches on the house shows. Because we would just go out there and we were doing stuff you would see, you know, uh, maybe even today or in ECW, just like crisp wrestling, doing like
Mhm.
lucha style stuff when nobody was doing that stuff because Candido was amazing. And I went to Vince. I was like, "Look, I really feel like I'm growing, and I want to do more." And he goes, "And if the opportunity's not here, I'd like my release because Kevin and Scott, had said, if you want to come to WCW, I'm not going to we can't really guarantee you what we're going to do, but we'll get you good payday,
Mhm. Yeah.
because money was not good. I was
Mhm.
making $75,000 a year, which I mean sounds okay, but when you factor in the travel and the amount of dates, I was really losing, and taxes as well. I was losing money if
Wow.
you really want to do the finances correctly. So Vince, when I asked him for the release, he goes, "No, I don't want to release you. I think you have a future here. You're a young man." He goes, "What I want to do is turn you heel, so I'll send you to Memphis to work Lawler's territory." And it was around the same time Rock was down in Memphis as well, kind of learning the deal.
Mhm.
Um, so I went down there for 6 weeks as PJ Walker, pretty much working as a heel gimmick. And after about 6 weeks, I was ready to come home. Paul Heyman was down there with ECW. They were doing an angle with Jerry Lawler,
Okay.
and Paul got to see me work. And Candido pitched; he was there as well. Pitched it to Paul. Paul went to Vince and got my contract kind of, thrown to him, and that's when I came into ECW.
Mhm. And when you went to ECW, that's when you really took off as just
Yes, sir.
incredible.
Yes, sir.
How is your relationship with Paul Heyman today? You talk to him
It's
at all?
fine. It's fine.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. He was always really good to me. I
Okay.
was, at a time where ECW was struggling towards the end there. I mean, I was this world champion, and people complain about bounce checks, and there was a lot of that going on. But
Mhm.
he always made good to me.
Mhm.
I never had a problem because I mean he had to keep certain guys happy, right? I mean, Van Dam always got paid, Sabu always got paid. I mean, I
Mhm.
remember one time he bounced a check to me, and I have a family in Jersey. My wife's family's from Jersey, and we were coming through Jersey, and he goes, "Stop by my house." um, you know, somewhere in near New York City. So I stopped
Okay.
by, cuts me a new check. It was good, and he gave me an ounce of pop too. So for the bounce check, so I'll give him
Mhm.
that. But no, Paul and I've always been good.
Mhm.
So I don't speak to him anymore. Not because there's heat, but he's busy doing his own thing.
Yeah, you go from WWE, which is sort of almost like at that time it was all about kids, to now
Sure.
going to extreme where you're going through tables, barbed wire. How did you have to learn to wrestle differently? Did you that was tough?
It wasn't. At first, I was nervous. I was
I'm
really
sure.
nervous because, I thought these guys were barbarians and like, oh my God, I can't do this stuff.
Mhm.
I was really intimidated. But when I got there, and I had my first couple of matches, Paul explained to me, he goes, look, there's guys that do this stuff like the Balls Mahoney's and this one and that one. And then there's guys that wrestle. I just want you to be a wrestler.
Okay.
So from there, I started a feud with Jerry Lynn, which is one
Oh,
of the,
nice.
so I
Big,
was doing
big time.
wrestling, and then I slowly started to incorporate some hardcore stuff. Worked with
Mhm.
Sabu and Sandman, but it was always, I never had a problem with it. It wasn't as bad as I initially had thought. And again, it is a work, and I got to see, oh, they're as much as people think, oh, that was a shoot, a lot of it was a work. Like, for example, when I did barbed wire match with Tommy Dreamer for a pay-per-view,
Yeah,
as
I remember
Tommy and I are talking the match over, we're also clipping the barbs to make sure that they're not super sharp. We're
Okay.
so then I started to realize, wow, this is really all about visual.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And it wasn't
Mhm.
as much, maybe in the early days it was, I'm sure, the early stuff was, I
Mhm.
bet. But
Mhm.
like when we got there and it started to evolve, it was a little different. So I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Who showed you how to blade for the first time?
Uh, I did.
Oh, you did it yourself. Just
Yeah.
kind of just learned, really?
Yeah, just believe it or not, I'd done it in the backyard, very little, but I remember somebody. I know it's ridiculous, but I remember somebody telling me to just kind of poke. So I always just poked. I never did the slice. So I
Mhm.
just poke a little bit and just push out, and it does enough.
Poke and twist.
Yeah, and it doesn't need a lot.
Oh, wow.
So.
Which gimmick did you prefer, Aldo or Justin
Oh
Credible?
God, Justin for sure,
Sure,
for
yeah, I was
sure.
a big
But I
fan.
mean, the more I look back, maybe it's just fond memories. But Aldo was for the time, was a cool, like, white meat babyface kind of guy, and I actually didn't mind Aldo.
Mhm.
Certainly, I did then. Certainly not as much now.
What
For
about
sure.
heel or babyface? What do you prefer?
I don't know, man. I like. I'm a natural. I was always a natural baby face. Not saying I'm a baby face like people want
Yeah.
to cheer me, but I was good at it. I was a good
Okay.
baby face.
Mhm.
So I guess both equally, really. And I don't have any preference over another. But I love being a baby face.
Mhm.
It's much easier because you just get to sell,
Yeah. Yes,
you
exactly.
know. And I don't have a big move set, so
Mhm. When you were just incredible, you got managed by Nicole Bass for a little bit,
yes,
right?
yes.
How was she with her as your manager?
She was nice, man. I loved Nicole. She was super cool. Unfortunately, she didn't come from the business,
Right.
and I don't think she understood, like, a lot of the stuff. So she would get ribbed a lot. She would get made fun of a lot,
Mhm.
which is not cool. She was a sweetheart of a person,
Yeah.
and I really I love being around her. She was a great energy, but unfortunately, she had some dark stuff. Her husband, who was really managing her
Yeah.
outside of wrestling, like professionally, and he was a real scumbag and just put her in bad situations.
Mm.
That she was just. I looked at her like a poor soul. She was just always being taken advantage of, unfortunately. But
Mm. Wow. That's pretty sad. What was your favorite match, Tommy Dreamer or Jerry Lynn? I mean, you had some great matches with them.
sure. I think Jerry Lynn. I would say Jerry Lynn and Sabu were two of
Sabu,
my
yeah.
favorites. For sure, the one I really admire is the one. There's one people talk about, Heat Wave '98.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good one.
That's a
But the
real good
one where I dropped the title to Jerry Lynn in his hometown of St. Paul, Minnesota, was definitely up there as well.
one.
Jerry was just a super pro, and every time we got in there, man, it
Hmm.
was magic. It really was. He was so great, so
Hmm.
easy to work with.
Yeah. Paul Heyman, obviously, he had you win the title. When did you know you were going to win the title? Because that's the company saying we're putting
Of
everything in
course.
you.
Yes, and that's what that means to me. Like, a lot of people, like, I didn't win anything for real,
Hmm.
but the flowers you get are the company trusts you to close the
Yeah.
show every night. And I ended up main eventing, a ton of pay-per-views, and doing that, and that was really, really special. It meant a lot to me. It really did. It really
Hmm.
did.
Mm. I was going to ask you, and I want to address sort of the elephant in the room. You
Sure,
actually had some heat on you recently. You've been on a bunch of podcasts.
sure.
You are Maven. Maven's a friend of mine. He's a great guy. There was a podcast with Maven, and he addressed some issues. Mario Mancini came up,
Yes.
and he said some things about him. You jumped on him, and then Mario sort of did a rebuttal response video
Yeah.
where he goes, "Hey, you know what? I didn't say anything. It was Scott Wilder." So what I'm
Right.
going to ask you, I was not there. I don't know.
Sure.
But
Oh, I'll be totally open about it.
he says that it was Scott Wilder, and maybe you owe him an apology. What do you think about this?
I don't know, man. Everybody talks so much. I never talk business, because everybody can, bitches when I do something wrong, and that's
Mhm.
fine. I got to take that. But that day we were at a convention. There
Okay.
was literally nobody coming through, And I think and I've loved Scott Wilder for so long. Him and I were good friends. He'd booked me on several things. And I guess I'd, gone for a while. I was in a mall and I went out and I just got some food or something. I don't know what it was. And then maybe I took a little bit longer than I should have. That was the heat, I guess. And when I went to get paid for that, I'd gotten an advance. When I went to get the rest of my money, he didn't give it to me. He said, "Oh, I'll PayPal it to you." And then all of a sudden, there's heat. Like, you've never, why wouldn't you just talk to me as a person? He said, "Oh, I didn't get this or that. I don't have the cash." So I didn't get paid for that event.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, there was literally, I signed anything that was asked, but there was literally maybe 10 people tops that came through the booth. So it was a bad event, period. And I think he did that to kind of shake any responsibility he had, because again, I didn't get paid for it. So, and then I just hear chatter, and Mario, I don't even know him, dude. I traveled with him to that show, and he's just one of those guys that just rubs me the wrong way. I'm such a nice guy, dude. And if you talk to anybody in the business, I don't think there's a lot of people that could say a lot of bad things as far as the boys. I've always been liked. I've never, ever had a problem. So to me, it took me aback. Like, I told my wife, I'm like, "Scott didn't pay me." He goes, "Really?" Like, we couldn't believe it. He was like our friend. So it really was sad. And I still, to this day, don't understand what I did that was so awful. I wish somebody would tell me, because I didn't, I don't know. It's wild.
Yeah.
Still a weird situation.
Yeah. From what I gather from the podcast, they said you were leaving the table all the time. I mean,
There was
I don't.
nobody there. I
Okay.
literally sat there forever. And when you sit somewhere for 4 hours or 5 hours, because it was a long day, it was
Yeah.
like 11 to 4. And I'm like, we're not, you know what I mean? There's no food. I went and got some food. We're in a mall. It's like, I
Yeah.
get it if, like, I'm not doing business, but
Gotcha.
I didn't, there's nobody there, dude. So to
Mm-hmm.
me, it's just like, okay, if that's the blame and you don't want to pay me for that,
Mm-hmm.
dude, I've done that every time. If I'm
Mm-hmm.
at an event and there's nothing happening for a minute, I'll go grab a sandwich.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I got you. You're very smart to the business. You're really
Sure,
good.
yeah.
You know the business. You're smart to the business. And you are part of the clique in a way. Would you ever consider maybe reaching out to Shawn Michaels, Triple H, say, "Hey, maybe I can help in the writers' room," because you're really smart. You know this business. What do you think?
I've thought of it, but I'm really ready to put wrestling behind.
Oh,
I
you are.
really, yeah. I just, man, for so many years, it's either really hot or really cold,
Hmm.
and I've just had I find that there's not a lot of integrity in the business right now, and I'm just not equipped for it. I'm very old school,
Hmm.
and just the way things have kind of happened in the last 6 months, even like solidifies more that I'm just, it's just time I kind of grew out of it and just find something else. I'm 51 years old. I'm
Hmm.
healthy. I need to just focus on something else, for the long run, for my life, for my wife, for myself, for my family, because I have three
Hmm.
kids. All of them. My old youngest is going to college this year.
Oh, congrats.
Graduates high school. So I got to worry about that, not BS. And I don't want, and another thing too is, I don't want people, my kids saying, "Dad, what's this on the internet? What's this bullshit? It's embarrassing to the
Yeah.
family." So
I'm sure.
I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah,
you
I
know.
can imagine. You don't watch any of the wrestling today? You don't watch any of it?
I do. I do. I
You do?
watch occasionally. Sure, I watched WrestleMania. I'll put on. I'll watch clips more than full shows. But and I was an avid AEW watcher, because Vince Russo and I, for his podcast, we did a
Yeah.
weekly review
Mhm.
until he just couldn't watch it anymore. So
Mhm.
but that lasted about a year. So I was watching AEW religiously, but
Mhm.
I'll watch clips and stuff. But not.
Okay.
I do
But
enjoy
see,
it though. I really do still enjoy the business, for
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
you seem like you have a love-hate relationship with it because there's good sides
I
to it
think
and there's bad
everybody
sides.
does, right? And it's in it
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
long time.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, it's the way it is. People don't realize too, on the road, you travel a lot on the road.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Um, how is the road life? Trying to get to the gym, trying to, get to the hotels. How is the road life in the traveling?
Um, it depends who you're traveling with. It
Mhm.
could be good, it could be easy, it could be challenging. It just depends. When you're in the WWE, it's actually not that hard. in my opinion, because everything is mapped out for you, and plus you start to you start to know where things are in certain towns, where the food is, the better food, where the gyms are, what hotels you normally stay at. So I think it's a lot of that. With time, I think you kind of get more comfortable. Now for indie shows and stuff that I do today, it's more of a crapshoot. You really don't know what's going to happen. Anything can happen, and that's a little not as good.
So I was saying on the road, WWE doesn't pay for
No,
hotel or
no, sir.
car.
No,
They
sir.
don't.
They did, at least when I was there, they did not pay hotel, they did not pay food, and they did not pay rental car.
They pay for your flight if you had to fly.
Yes, that's it.
That
That's
was
it.
it.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's a lot big expense. People don't realize.
It's a huge, and that's why when I said earlier, when I was making $75,000 a year, it wasn't $75,000. It's minus all the expenses, and even back then, a lot of the reason for the click was we were all, we'd rent a van and we'd be chipping in maybe 15, $20 a piece to lower our expenses. I would room with Scott so we could split that hotel bill to, lower expenses. So sure. Yeah. Yeah. But
Wow.
today I'm sure it's different. I hear it's different,
Yeah, I hear
but in my
it's different.
generation, we had to pay for everything.
What about merchandise? Do you get anything from merchandise these days or anything like that?
These days, I do not. I used to get royalty checks up until about 6 months ago, but I'm not on anything new right now. So no, unfortunately.
Wow. Wow,
Yeah.
that really stinks. If all the people that know you know your career, what would you want people to remember your career as, your wrestling career, for what you did?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I would just want people to remember that I wrestled hard. I was always, no matter what happened, I always went out there to entertain. I loved the business as much as the fans did. And that I was just really passionate. And anytime they saw me as either as Aldo or just incredible, that they were going to get a quality performance. And I always tried, and I think I always, for the most part, did. I don't think there's not a lot of stinkers out there for me. If you go on YouTube or the network and stuff and look, there are not a lot of stinkers. So I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, you were a really good worker. I mean, really good worker. I mean, a lot of
Yeah,
people don't realize
thank
that.
you. Yeah. I tried really hard. That was, to me, the most important part, was knowing your craft and putting on the best match you can.
Mhm. And I know that some of these people, some of these fans said recently that we had some issues with you as far as getting whatever signed or whatever. But I think you're trying to become that. Do what some things happen. Get mixed
Sure.
up in the mail or
I
whatever.
was not prepared for that. I really
Yeah.
wasn't.
Mhm.
And I remember when it happened, I would get an order for something and I would not even mark it down. I would just say, okay, because it was so light.
Yeah.
And I'll remember that one. And then
Yeah.
as it got a little more, I was like, oh my God, I'm not like accounting for shit. I'm not a good businessman in that aspect. My wife said, we're not going to do that again, but if we do, I'm handling that business side of it. I'm like, yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Wow.
Put it this
Now,
way, I know it sounds bullshit, but it's really not. If you know me, you know it's real. Especially my friends, they'll laugh at this. There was no ill intention to rip anybody off. Like why would I rip somebody off of an autograph? It was
correct.
just me not being diligent with it. That's all.
Yeah.
It wasn't meant to, you know what I mean? But anyways,
Yeah.
I digress.
Yeah, but you're a really cool dude, and like I said, you were really good to the fans, and I've seen that before and a lot of stuff, and people don't realize that. And you went through some struggles, like we all did. Myself, I'll go through personal things. Where can people reach you if they want to book you for a podcast or whatever?
Sure, that's a good one. You could email me at polacopeter73@gmail.com, or
Okay.
go on my X, aka Twitter, at PJ Polaco, and Instagram, same thing, everything across the board, PJ Polaco Polaco.
And you're on Instagram and you're on
Yes, sir.
Twitter.
And I answer right back because I have
Yes,
no
you are.
life.
No, PJ, thank you so much
Oh,
again.
thank you, Joe.
I
You're a
appreciate-
wonderful man. Thank you for being so good to me.
No, and like I said, we're gonna hook up later too for some other stuff too down the road.
Yes,
to
sir.
get together with some more stuff. You're an awesome dude. I appreciate your time, PJ. I'll talk to you soon, brother.
Thank you, sir. God bless.
God bless, brother.
Thanks for watching the Zapata Brand podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast and listen where all podcasts are available.